Welcome to the Gen Z Voices panel. And for those who will be tuning in to this awesome conversation, thank you for tuning in. There's going to be a lot of great insights shared here. And I just want to kind of set the stage a little bit and also introduce myself. So my name is Mimi Gonzalez. I will be the facilitator for this awesome conversation. I am an organizational development consultant that really works with organizations on Gen Z inclusion, engagement, and retention, and also social impact strategies and consulting. But this is really my favorite thing to do is talk all things Gen Z and really getting to have organizations learn on how to connect with us because we're the future. So with that, I definitely want to have our panelists introduce themselves. But before I do, I wanted to briefly say, so I recently met Tracy at a women's event not too long ago, and we were really talking about some of the misconceptions that are around Gen Z that maybe older generations may have, or really also want to understand the motivations behind Gen Z when it comes to applying for jobs or expectations in the workplace, because understanding these insights are really going to help future employers help connect with Gen Z. So that's really kind of what our conversation is going to be about this evening. And I am so grateful for you all for joining this conversation. So I am going to hand it over to each of you to briefly introduce yourself. Maybe you can say, your name, where you're tuning in from, maybe what you do, just a brief background, and then we'll jump right in. So I'm going to pass it over to Justin and then Paige and then Myra.
Hi everyone, my name is Justin Casala. I am currently a student studying mechanical engineering at Penn State. That's currently where I am right now. Actually, I just got out of class not too long ago. So I'll hop right on this Zoom call with you guys, this panel. Excited to get started. And in addition to my studying, I work two additional part-time jobs, one as a culinary manager on campus actually with one of the dining commons that students can eat at. So I do a lot of back of house stuff, a lot of stuff people don't really see, but a lot of management, working with a lot of different people, students and full-time employees alike. And my other job, I work as a data analyst, excuse me, for a company called Pro Football Focus, where we do a lot of NFL and college football analysis, data recording, stuff like that. So I got my hands full. I'm usually like to keep myself busy doing stuff.
Awesome. That was great. Thanks for being here and thanks for sharing. So Paige, take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm Paige Watson. I am calling in from Auburn, Alabama. I recently started here as a tenure track professor in the psychology department. My current job is primarily a research and teaching role, so about 75% research, 20% teaching, and 5% service. I also have experience in running my own small business for a volleyball program, working in human resources in the past, and other odd jobs like customer service and retail. So a couple of different experiences that I have that I'm happy to speak to and share today.
Wow, I can tell this is already going to be a great conversation. And Myra, please feel free to take it away.
Yeah, of course. My name is Myra Vasquez. I am a senior at the University of Connecticut studying management. When I'm non-studying, I work at Hartford Healthcare at one of their hospitals, which is Hartford Hospital, coincidentally. And I work there in their ICU unit as an administrative assistant and basically helping along visitors and patients on the floor and such. But yeah, that's really what I do.
I love it. And I want to say how else I know Myra. So I'm also part-time. I can see a trend here. We all have multiple jobs that we do. I'm a director of career development at an awesome organization called Hartford Promise, and Myra is one of our scholars, our Hartford Promise scholars. So thought she would be perfect for this conversation with you both. So all right, so as I mentioned, I definitely see one thing we can completely knock out of the park as a common misconception about Gen Z is that we don't want to work, right? Like, can we just totally knock that down right now and say that we do like to work and if anything, we have our hands in multiple pots. Like, what do we think? Does anyone want to kind of jump in and react to that? Like, have you ever heard that misconception before? What do you think about that? Anyone, feel free to come off mute and kind of answer that.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Not getting into any specifics, but I hear from even some of the people I work with, some professors I've talked to just mentioned it in passing. It's definitely a common conception I just kind of thought was true growing up. It was like, oh, I guess I just don't like to work. But as I've gotten older and being able to work with people my age a lot, the one job I have as a manager is completely full of Gen Z kids, kids around my age. And I don't, for the most, I mean, obviously there's exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, I really don't agree with that conception or that common misconception people have for Gen Z, especially at least not in my case. I know I love to work, so.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Paige, Myra, you want to say anything there?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Justin. Like when I started doing internships for my degree a little while ago, I started college when I was 17 years old. So when going into the work field and such, people would question me. They'd be just like, "Oh, you look a little young, to be here," or "How old are you?" in a sense. And those questions were just kind of like, "Oh, like they're probably like really interested to see why such a young person is here." But now discovering a little more as to why those questions are being asked, it really makes me like ponder, like, is there a more wider conception of, we just don't want to work, we're just not in the work field or being expected in the work field. That's
Yeah.
Justin said in his earlier topic.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll just add that speaking for myself, like on the older end of Gen Z, but also as a professor, I work a lot with and talk with a lot of current undergraduate students who are in that 18 to 22, 23 range. And majority of my students right now in my Psych of the Workplace class, I think 47 out of 50 currently have a job, and 49 out of 50 have had a job in the past. And so, small sample size there, but in the classes I've taught, most people are working somewhere. For me and my peers, we're also working, especially now that we're in that post-college, but still early career stage, still eager to have a job or jobs to help us feel fulfilled, but also to make money, work towards goals, etc.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you all for sharing. Yeah, I definitely have shared that experience. I would say I'm a zillennial, so I'm the micro generation between Gen Z and millennials. So I don't know if y'all know that, but anyone born 1995 to 2000, technically we're zillennials, and anyone born after 2000 is Gen Z. But it's all really great conversation. And similar to you, Myra, I started college, I was 16 turning 17, and then I finished undergrad in 3 years and I started my master's at 20 years old. Everyone in my master's program was well over 30 and 40s and 50s. And yeah, you're just kind of used to being that first or the only young person in the room. But if anything, I feel like you're able to absorb and learn so much from our older peers that it makes you kind of like a better employee or a better worker, So that's just my experience. But I wanted to ask, so what are some like top factors that you would say would influence your decision when considering applying to a job, or if you're offered a job? Like, what are those top factors that kind of go into that decision of accepting said job offer? Paige, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I was recently on the academic job market, looking for a tenure track professor role. And when I was applying for different positions and my interviews and making decisions about where I wanted to work, it really boiled down to three main factors I was looking for. One, I wanted a company or an organization with ample resources that they were willing to put towards me. And so whether that be financial resources, financial support, more like emotional, relational resources through like mentorship, but providing me with a way to be the means to be successful. I also prioritized work-life balance. Academia can get a bad rep for being a publish or perish and having some strict guidelines to follow, but I wanted a place that truly wanted you to have a life outside of your research. And then lastly, I wanted a place that valued their students and and their faculty. And so seeing that respect at both of those levels of people I'd be regularly interacting with.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And Justin, Meyer, do you kind of agree with some of those decisions that kind of go into, those considerations that go into accepting a job?
Yeah, I think the big one that Paige hit on was probably the mentorship side of it. For me, being in engineering, I think that's a really big thing in general for a lot of the technical stuff, a lot of technical jobs in general. I think, it's one thing to go through your 4 years undergrad and get the degree and know kind of what you're doing on the technical side, but it's a whole other thing to then be able to properly apply that in a new job, wherever you might end up, internship, whatever it is. So I think having a company who's willing to, again, provide those resources to not hold your hand, but kind of walk you through for the first couple of months, or whatever kind of rotational programs they may have to, maybe at one company I was looking at Aerotech, one of their main giveaways I was like, oh, I have to apply for them was they have a rotational program where it's for the first 6 months, you don't just work in the, I guess, department you apply for. They rotate you through the mechanical engineering department, the application development. It's a whole bunch of different things where, maybe you apply to one place, but hey, you figure out you love another department and you actually are really good at it and you can stay there. So it's more of it's not necessarily a general hiring, but they are willing to, hey, if you don't work out in this role, there might be another one here at our company. We'd love to have you. And we're not just going to say, sorry, you don't work for the role you applied for. So, you can't work here. So I think things along those nature, that development, mentorship side of it, I think is a really big thing for me.
Yeah, totally agree. Myra?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Justin and Paige. Something that Paige said that really resonated with me was work-life balance for sure. Coming from a business background or coming from the business school, I would get internships, like, the accounting firms, the financial groups and such. And those really required you to come in from 7, 8 a.m. and like stay till 5 or 6 or whenever your project's done, basically. And so those really would be really, really time consuming for me in the summer, especially taking classes, also making sure my professional life is going well. Those are really, really time consuming. And so looking at what I want in the future is, having a good work-life balance and having that, not really take my work to home type of situation ever again. And then also making sure I have a good work environment as well, which is something Justin touched upon with the mentoring. I really want to have a manager I can go to and talk to if I, ever have a situation I'm dealing with or a project that I'm being having, questions about or considerations about, and openly having a good manager and employee relationship.
Mm. I think this is so great, and people tuning in are going to be so grateful for everything that you're sharing because yes, 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 yes. All I have to say is yes. So thank you for that. My next question, I think it's really important, just considering everything that's going on in the world right now and has been going on, right? We've had so many worldly things happen, right? We've navigated the pandemic, we've had so many changes, people working remotely and going back into the office. I mean, so many social justice things going on in the world. So I really wanted to ask, how important is it for you three for a company to kind of make a stance or have a stance on things that are going on social justice wise, environmental wise, DE&I wise? How important is that to you, and when it comes to deciding if you want to work for a company or not? And anyone, maybe we can start with you, Myra.
Yeah, I would like to say it's very important, especially if a company has a specific department dedicated to raising awareness to these issues. I remember my last internship, I worked in human resources, and they would be kind of the ones who took charge and spoke about issues like this. And so for me, it's really, really important, if a company does have like the means and like the, I want to say the audience in a sense, they need to talk about these issues. They need to at least, come up with a statement of how the company is like handling certain situations. But I would say it's really important. And, with future D&I initiatives, you need to kind of get on top of that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
I can go next. Yeah, I definitely agree. These stances on these important issues are important to me. I think that, especially, I think I'm the only person, at least on this call, tuning in from the South, and there's certain regions in the US or regions within states and different like systems that these organizations are operating in. And so being in organizations and departments, depending on how the org structure is set up, that are willing to take a stance and figure out how to navigate these issues, even if they're operating in systems that might be working against them, is really important to me. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here talking about DEI in particular, but for that, what's important to me isn't just an organization that is doing the bare minimum to avoid like compliance issues. Like I want an organization that is actively appointing a DEI committee or hiring specific DEI roles that can make sure that the organization is promoting inclusion and authenticity and doing more than the bare minimum on these issues, just to actually like walk the walk and talk the talk for us.
Wow, that was powerful. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Justin, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think as far as I guess the large scale issues, and let's take one like environmental, the environment in general. There's a whole lot of things going on with climate change, stuff like that. That's pretty big thing. I think it's not usually, I would say, at the forefront of my mind when it comes to, if I'm applying to a certain company or whatever it is. I think it's maybe it makes me an outlier on some things. But it's not really something that I would say would negate me wanting to work for a company should there be other benefits that I seek there. But I mean, it definitely matters. It's definitely a factor for me, but kind of how I said, it's not really, it's not going to swing the tides for anything where I want to work for this company or not. Now, if it's, obviously there are different cases. If it's like an absurd, super radical, like if there's no way I can see myself being a part of something like that. But I think, at least in my experience, when researching companies, meeting with different people from different companies, there isn't usually that much of I guess an extreme way one or the other. And obviously every company has their ideals and maybe ideas on how they should deal with certain issues. But as long as it isn't, again, like I mentioned, super radical, super out there, like, yeah, there's no way I can support that or work with someone like that or people will support that. I don't really see it as something that would affect my job search or where I might want to work in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's super valid. And I think that other people within Gen Z would probably share that same perspective. And I think it's important that no generation or no community or marginalized group or whatever group of people we're referring to, right? We're not monoliths, right? Like there's going to be people who have different experiences and different perspectives, and that's what it's all about. And I think this conversation is so important because it shows that we are not monolithic and that older generations can really understand that we're just like them, really, right? So I think this conversation is really good, and I'm really grateful for you sharing all of your perspectives on that. Briefly, I touched upon the pandemic, and I really would love for you all to talk about this. Maybe not go into super detail, right? Just in the interest of time, but maybe how the pandemic impacted you. I know some of you were in school or about to start school or just starting your career. So can you kind of talk about how the pandemic might have impacted you and maybe how it's even still impacting you now? And the reason I want to ask this question is because something that I notice in my work and working with certain organizations is that I think a lot of people want to move forward and just kind of forget that the pandemic happened. But I think that the pandemic impacted young people the most because these were core years that we were developing social skills and relationships with certain, mentors and things like that. Simple core things just didn't happen for us that happened for other generations. So I'm really curious to hear how that's impacted you and maybe how it's still even impacting you now. So maybe we can start with Paige.
Yeah, sure. So when the pandemic started, I was in graduate school. I was wrapping up my master's and starting my PhD program at the time. And I think in regards to like my career development and getting me to the next stage of a full-time job, it really limited my ability to gain like exposure and networking, and prevented me from having the opportunities that I could have had to kind of build those connections during graduate school, which is an important part of being able to go onto the job market successfully. So I think that was kind of an end process like issue from the pandemic. And then in regards to like residual issues, this one is a bit more specific, I think, to academia, but there's certain processes that slowed down during the pandemic that we haven't seen speed back up. So for example, like the peer review process, which is important for getting publications and our performance evaluations, et cetera, hasn't really got back to regular speed since the pandemic. And so it's kind of slowing down everything for everyone. And it's particularly impactful for younger academic or less newer academics who need these publications to get to the next stage of their promotion and tenure. So I'm definitely seeing some residual effects for us.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Thanks so much for sharing that. Myra and then Justin.
Yeah, I would say for me, I'm class of 2024. So 4 years ago, I was class of 2020. And it really, really did have a big impact, like COVID and all of that being, getting prom, graduation, all the last moments of high school taken away at like a snap of a finger was really, really like impactful for me. And then starting college virtually, not having, I want to say the like normal college experience of, being excited to move in and, all the excitement that comes around, being a first year. And then, with me being a person of color and going to a PWI, a predominantly white institution, it made me even more isolated to the connections and socializing and such when I first entered college. That being said, fast forward 4 years later, I want to say, looking back on my first 2 years, almost, it was really, really hard for me to develop social skills, like what you were saying, Mimi. Like I really wasn't able to talk to people without them talking to me or kind of stay to myself. I kind of got into the habit of like doing my own isolations, which is me just being in my room or me just with myself in a sense. And it was really, really hard for me to like kind of expand and get out of that shy character that I was always used to like in high school. And, it took a little while and, now I'm graduating and now I can see and I could finally, you know, see where I have grown and have become a better, I don't know, speaker, or I've been a better conversationalist or better friend or, just a better person overall. And, I think now uh that I'm going to work, and I'm applying to jobs, like I definitely would say I'm more excited to like be in person versus doing hybrid days or like doing virtual days. Like I definitely do see myself being in person and being like socially interactive with like people I work and where I work in a sense.
Mm, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
For me, similar to Myra, freshman, I'm the class of 2024. So I was a freshman, first year starting when the pandemic hit. And I think it was more of I guess, a psychological sense to kind of set me behind. And what I mean by that is kind of the professional development side to it. So when I got to school and I actually moved in and lived on my own my sophomore year, looking back now, I kind of consider it my freshman year light in a sense where I was kind of just there, just kind of chugging through classes, not really worrying about, what I need to look for internships or start networking or stuff like that. It just wasn't at the forefront of my mind because it was like the first time I was on my own doing my own thing. And at that point, I was kind of just about doing what I wanted to do in a sense where I think had I had my freshman year to kind of get that out the way in a sense, I could have started, networking and meeting people and connecting much sooner in a sense where that kind of took place more during my junior year and maybe back end of sophomore year where again, had that year not been taken away in a sense, that probably would have started back in the freshman year or all of sophomore year, and I would have had pretty much a whole 12 months extra to start networking and connecting. And I think I kind of lost out on maybe some opportunities that I don't even know about in a sense because of that.
Mm, yeah. Wow. That really resonated with me. And so I think my experience was a little different, but very similar in the sense of it definitely impacted my career for sure. But at this point, so I had graduated in 2018, so I had already been able to kind of start my career and I was still early career at that point, right? And it was interesting because I was in an HR rotational program with my company and like I was just thinking that, one day I go into the office and I'm having a regular work day and then literally we get like a mass email and they say, "Oh yeah, you might have to work from home tomorrow." And that was so unheard of. Like working from home was so unheard of for everyone in our company. And so we went home and then never went back to work for like 2.5 years. And it was just the weirdest thing. And at one point I remember we had to go back to the office to collect some of our belongings. Like I still had clothes, like, my jacket and things like that. And I remember that one time I went into the office, it just felt like a ghost town. Like still had like coffee in cups on their desk. And like, it was just such an eerie feeling. But during that time, definitely impacted like just that connection building with like senior leaders and things like that within the workplace. So I felt that I had to work that much harder being remote to really make myself stand out. And because I wasn't getting those natural opportunities for exposure, I had to really put myself in those virtual rooms, if you will, to get that. So, but with that, I would say blessing, curse, I don't know. I really would like to know your thoughts on this, but regarding um the pandemic and everything like that, I mean, it really forced employers and workplace leaders to shift, right? I mean, like our whole world completely shift. Like everyone in the entire world, no matter what country or region they were from, there was change that we were all feeling, right? So with that, we saw a lot of workplaces kind of shift to being remote, or even being in school, you had to do school remotely. So if we were to fast forward to today, what would you say is your preference? And I know, Myra, you talked a little bit about that. You said you would maybe prefer being on site. I'm seeing more like Zillennials kind of talk about like a hybrid situation. Millennials, I always kind of hear fully remote. Like I don't even want to be in the workplace. But I'm really curious to see what you all think. Maybe Paige and Justin, you can weigh in here. Like, and I know you're in academia, Paige, so I'm not really sure how that works. But yeah, I'm curious to know. Remote, hybrid, or on-site full time? What are your thoughts? Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah,
sorry.
that whatever works.
Um, I very much prefer on-site, I will say. I think it would be nice to have, the opportunity, the flexibility to, hey, maybe one day this week I can't come in for whatever reason, or I just don't want to, and I know there's work I can do at home. I think having that opportunity to do that maybe one hybrid day a week or every now and then I think would be great. But I think overall, similar to my house, you said like being stuck inside and starting that freshman year all virtual. I feel like it's kind of brought that out of me where I want to be there. Like I don't really see the appeal, I guess, in my situation for wanting to stay at home, at least for an extended period of time.
Mm. I'm also wondering if the type of industry you're in, I mean, mechanical engineering, I would assume you'd have to be in person most of the time anyway, right?
Yeah, it's for a lot of the stuff, it's not even stuff I could do at home in the sense, so kind of lends itself well to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely prefer more of a hybrid approach. I like the flexibility to be able to work from home or work from the beach or wherever I want to work from. So I do like that flexibility. I will say that when I like the idea of it's in academia, it doesn't really work this way, but I like the idea of like there being certain days in the week where everyone is on site, just so that way you have an opportunity to interact with people on a regular basis. I think that the way it works where I'm at now, there are some days I won't see a single person, and then some days I might see one or two, but it's not really consistent. So it'd be nice to have hybrid, but then like a day or two a week that everyone's on campus or on site, so that way you can still foster those like relationships and the more informal connections versus everything being a serious meeting as your way that you're connecting.
I love that. That's really interesting. Actually, one of my part-time job, it's hard. We are mostly a hybrid team, but we kind of go into the office one day a week and everyone's there. And then the last day of every month, we go to lunch at a restaurant. And that's really cool because that's exactly what you said. We kind of form those relationships and have that in-person connection. And yeah, I really like that. I'm kind of learning. I also like the hybrid situation because I travel a lot. I do a lot of speaking engagements. I just really like that flexibility. Or some days are just not feeling good, and working from home is like a really good option to have if that's the case. Um, But yeah, wrapping up here, I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. I do have one last question regarding what advice you would have for potential employers or employers now to really connect with Gen Z? Like, what are some things or outstanding things, benefits, perks, just anything that can come to mind for you that workplaces and employers can offer Gen Z that you think would make them want to work there? Justin, we can start with you for this one.
Yeah, so I think a couple of big things I've really enjoyed in some of my part-time jobs I've had, and even just hearing from other experiences people have had in other companies, I think clarity for the promotion process is a big one for me. Now, obviously, I don't need you a bullet point list for every step I need to take to get there, but I think having kind of, a really ambiguous way to get promoted, like why did this person get it? I mean, I don't really understand what they did, or I think it just allows for, if I start a company, like, hey, if I do these things and I'm working hard, I know there's a good shot I can get promoted within 7, 8, 9, 10 months, whatever it be. Whereas it's more ambiguous, it's kind of like, well, I know it's there, but I don't know is there something I should be doing different? Or like, is there something I'm doing to stay overtime? Or like, I feel like positions like those, it makes it kind of difficult for, at least me, I think a lot of Gen Z people in general, like, what am I working for in a sense? Like, am I just here to come do my job and collect a paycheck, or are there clear opportunities for advancement in the company, whether laterally, vertically, whatever it may be? So I think that's a pretty big one for me. Probably the biggest one I would say. I don't know if there's any other I can think of right now. I think free food's always great. That's an informal one. Lunch every now and then, I think that would be great, but that's I guess more of an informal one.
I love it. I love the authenticity there. I love, love, love it. That's hilarious. Myra.
Honestly, one for me, and I talk about this a lot with my program, Hartford Promise, is mental health. I feel like companies need to have mental health days as like a set thing. I feel a lot of people say like, oh, I'm just gonna have to take a mental health day, and they just take a sick day, out of their vacation time and such. And I actually think that companies need to integrate, having mental health days as one of the things that you could take out for big, I don't know, like time off. Yes, that's the word I was looking for time off. Because after going through COVID and the pandemic, I feel like mental health is a very now issue, and a lot of people are finding out like what they need and who they need to talk to in a sense. And um, it's a really pressing issue that, in a sense, needs to get treated, and people need to have days to themselves or days to get treated in a sense. And I feel like companies need to prioritize that a little more uh, when they're looking at like time off packages.
Mm, that's really huge. And I feel like that is definitely a common topic amongst Gen Z is definitely mental health. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I completely agree. And yeah, Paige, take it away.
Yeah, so Myra, I love your answer. I think my first thought was more of Justin's answer, so I won't rehash that since he did such a great job explaining it. Um, so I think for me, in addition to Myra and Justin's answers, and the hybrid work, or at least some sort of flexibility in work scheduling being a third one, I think, and this taps into an earlier point, not assuming that everyone wants the same thing. And I think based on our conversations thus far, what I would want or need as an academic and what Justin would want and need as a mechanical engineer is quite different. And so instead of making uniform decisions or assumptions, to actually kind of evaluate, like assess, measure. I'm a psychologist, like IO person, so I'm really into statistics, but finding ways to actually assess like what does your workforce want or need, what can you do, and trying to have a more data-driven approach to it as opposed to just reading the most recent news article and trying to make a decision based off of it. So I guess my advice would be to use data to help make the decisions. And yeah.
That was really great. I'm really grateful for all of your insights because I amplify all of that, I really do. I think that all these are very important. And I think these are the types of conversations that workplaces are kind of forced to have anyways, because by 2030, a lot of Gen Z is going to be the majority of the workforce. It's going to be Gen Z and millennials, and a lot of Of course, Gen X leaders will probably be like senior leaders or executives and things like that, but baby boomers are really starting to retire even now. So I think these are really important conversations that workplaces are already starting to have. And if they haven't, they're going to learn the hard way. So I think that these insights are going to be super beneficial, super helpful. One thing I wanted to add in there was something I'd like to see, and it's actually something I help organizations with, is establishing Gen Z advisory councils. Because to your point, Paige, not everyone is going to need the same exact thing, but that's the whole importance of equity and accessibility and just making sure everyone has the resources they need to be successful in the workplace and healthy and, mentally sound and just connected and engaged at work. And I think that, not that I think Gen Z has all the answers or anything like that, but I do think that we're really, in touch with the world and everything that's going on. And I feel that if, older generations really kind of prioritize speaking with the younger generations and kind of co-building and focusing on the intergenerational relationship, I really think amazing things can happen. And so that's something I would like to see more, in line with everything else that you all said. Um, is there anything that we didn't get to talk about or we shared that you would like to mention that you think is really important? Like just for y'all to think, if future employers watching this video can, take away anything from this conversation, is there anything that we didn't touch upon yet that you would like to share? Anything stand out?
I guess I would just say, I mean, keep it simple. I mean, don't judge a book by its cover, or don't judge a book by what you've heard about it. I mean, I think that's, I guess, what we're trying to get at here with the whole panel is, obviously the whole misconception Gen Z doesn't want to work. I think is probably the one that bothers me the most. So I think just, really taking the time to, really get to know people. Don't just assume, oh, he's 22, he doesn't want to be here. He'd rather be at home doing whatever else. And that's not always true. I think for the majority of us, it's not true. And so I think just have an open mind, I guess, is, how you would treat, maybe if you're Gen X, how you would treat your other Gen X people. Treat Gen Z the same way. Get to know them. Get to figure out what they like, what they don't like. Because I mean, you might end up finding a gem. You never know. So I think it's important that we, people, everyone in general, just have an open mind with people of all different ages, ethnicities, backgrounds, whatever it may be. So that's kind of what I wanted to add.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I also wanted to amplify really quickly that there are people in older generations that really value and love what Gen Z is doing when it comes to pushing the boundaries and having really important conversations in the work. So I also wanted to shout out and give kudos to those folks who are doing that, because that is exactly what we need to be able to navigate the future and stuff like that. So I don't want it to just seem like, oh, all older people don't like Gen Z, because that's certainly not the case. But Paige, I saw you come off mute, so feel free to share some of your insights.
Yeah, Mimi, I think you've done a great job of like facilitating this so that almost everything I've wanted to say has been brought up to some degree. But just building on Justin's point, I think that part of it isn't just managing and figuring out how to retain and attract Gen Z, but also managing the perceptions of Gen Z. And so trying to help foster those intergenerational connections, because right now it's Gen Z, but fast forward a few years and we'll be having similar conversations about the next group and the next group. And so trying to find ways that we can facilitate this going forward as we have aging generations, we have advancing technology that's kind of existing outside of this, that's changing work. And so it's not a one size or like a one way issue. Like there's lots of different factors at play here. And so trying to look at it more holistically and focusing on perceptions and not just management.
1,000%. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Mike, want to add anything? And
Yeah.
then we'll
Yeah, of course. I definitely agree with Paige's point that and I'm just talking for myself. I think there's much more to think about than just the check, and just about like the salary in a sense, when taking full-time offers, especially now as I'm looking into jobs in a sense, a company could be offering me more money than another, but it's really how I feel there. Do I feel welcome? Do I feel included? am I going to be excluded from certain conversations just because I don't look the part? Or am I just going to be not welcomed or feel a certain type of way? I don't want to feel this way. And I feel like some Gen Zers like myself, like we want to be welcome. We want to be in conversations. We want to, start the conversations too. And so are these places going to be, welcoming? Are these places going to, you know, like the idea of having Gen Z around, and that's something I consider when taking full-time off, when looking at full-time offers, it's much more than the check for me.
Mm, wow. That is really great. And I think that's a perfect way to really wrap up this conversation because I think if the pandemic taught us anything, if all of the things going on in our world right now are teaching us anything, is that life is more about life is more than work or just the money that we get, right? A lot of people are searching for their purpose, and it doesn't have to be this grand purpose in life, but what's your purpose right now? And maybe our purpose right now is to be healthy and to have work life. I don't really like to say work life balance. I like to say work life harmony because some responsibilities are going to have more energy and attention than others on a given day. But right, like that's really important. I think a lot of people are having those, internal conversations and paradigm shifts as we continue to go into the workplace and integrate with all of these changes and technology, to your point, Paige, that you said. But yeah, I am really grateful for everything you all shared, and it just gives me a lot of life and energy because yeah, I don't know, I love these types of conversations, and I know that people tuning in are going to learn a lot from you three, and the conversation doesn't end here, y'all. Like, let's stay in contact and keep having these conversations, and please, like, have them with peers in the workplace or wherever you are, like strike a conversation and I would love to hear, people's insights when you have these types of conversations and discussions. But with that, thank you so much for your time and thank you for being part of the Gen Z Voices panel. And I look forward to connecting with you more in the future.